What's that?
Oh, I'm cracking.
No worries. Hey, greetings, Fred in Alaska. Want to give a shout out, D.A. Roberts. It was a fun podcast last night, man. Thanks for having me on. Hello to William Nighthawk, Anthony. Anyway, what I wanted to share with you guys today happened on the Tikchik River about 25 years ago. Daniel paid to fly in, and he was up there to trout fish, and he was, from what he remembers, he was on the first big bend. So there's some kind of squiggly bends on it when it comes up from Tikchik Lake, which is just northwest of where I had my incident in 06. So there's the first big bend after a few little wiggles up the river, and it hooks to the right a little bit and then sharply up to the left. He was dropped off there on that bank, kind of like on a little spit, just so he could drop his line in and it can curve down the river. Just longer presentation of his fly. So he was up there. The service he was with had dropped him off per his request. He had, I believe he said it was like a 480 Ruger handgun, chest vest or chest holster, and he all his fly gear on, you know, and he sat there for about 3-4 hours, he said, because they were going way up further river, and the guide was going to stay with those people since he was armed and been there about 4 times before over the years, and loved catching trout there. So he wets his line for, after about 4 hours in, and it's drifting down, and as it clears and swirls around in this small, it's not even an eddy, it's just kind of little swirl in the water, he reels in and he's starting to pack up his gear, and because he figures any time the boat will be coming back down with the other guests of the service, and you know, he'd be ready to go. So he sits down and he's eating a snack at the edge of the riverbank, and as he's sitting there, he just keeps getting a weird feeling, and the wind had picked up and he had the willows behind him, and it was just kind of a wave of green behind him as it was going on. It was roughly the first week of August, and so, you know, some of the leaves had started to change. You know, the berry patches that were around kind of had their fall coloring starting to kick in and whatnot. And so he was just kind of gazing around, eating his snacks, just kind of, you know, keeping an eye out for bears. And as he's doing so, about the second time he looks over, he notices a dark figure in the willows as the wind blows. And immediately he jumps up, he pulls out the 480 Ruger. He's got it out there. He's looking at whatever he can see, really nervous and jumpy, because what he saw, he knew he had relieved himself over by those willows about an hour before, and there was obviously way taller than him when he went over there. So when he saw that dark shadow when the wind blew, he knew it was way bigger than him, and immediately he thought bear. So, you know, he's scanning the trees, he's trying to find whatever he can to figure out, you know, identify the bear basically. So he's totally on edge, he's looking all around, he's looking for cubs. He was really worried about a sow with cubs, and, you know, rightfully so. And so as he's contemplating what to do, the dark figure is no longer there. He saw it very briefly, jumped up, and was on point from that moment forward. So he decides he's gonna go and get a little further downwind and try to see if he can smell this bear. As he goes downwind a little bit, he's just gets over by the willow line. He's trying to look in and kind of smell the air and see if he could smell a bear, and he's not smelling anything, and he hears rustling off to his left hand side. Turns and he's trying to look through to see if he can see anything looking back at him, a curious bear, maybe a young bear. He was really he didn't know what to think in those moments, is basically what it boils down to, because he was all over the place with his thinking. He just knew something wasn't feeling right. So it dawns on him, he's a little close to those willows, backs away back to where he was standing fishing, and he's kind of looking up the river to see if he hears the boat starting up, and he wants out of there. So basically he's on this little grassy spit on the high bank, and he's trying to figure out, you know, he's got nowhere to hide. He kind of backed himself to the riverbank, so it's go in the river if he has to, kind of deal. he's armed though, so he's, you know, he has some kind of protection. Well, he's just constantly focusing on this willow line, trying to, you know, see if he sees any dark movement or whatever. And he decides, well, I'm just going to go over by them, scream, and let off a shot, and that'll chase any bear off. He had his game plan, so he executed it. He runs over, screams, and boom, lets a shot off. And it cracks. I mean, it echoes around and everything. I mean, it was a 480 Ruger, a little hand cannon. And so he backs back up to where he was, and he keeps scanning the willow trees to see, because he didn't hear any movement whatsoever. And he just, after the shot and the ringing in his ears was subsiding, he was hearing a low kind of, it wasn't necessarily a hum, it was like someone getting ready to say something kind of sound, he said, which he didn't elaborate. So he hears this lower tone in a constant and yells out, "Hey, who's there? Who's there?" Hears nothing, sits there, and at this time he's got the hammer cocked again and focused on the trees. And as he's, you know, kind of contemplating whether he's gonna stand there and wait for a return answer, he backs back up to where he was, kind of gets down on his knees and kind of makes himself smaller to the ground so he could maybe draw whatever it is into his view, thinking, you know, he kind of gave up kind of thing. I don't know. He didn't really elaborate on really what he was thinking with that. So as he's down on his knees, he hears movement and immediately stands back up and is nervous as hell. He said that as he was scanning the trees, he just knew he was being watched, but he couldn't find where he was being watched from, and it really bothered him, to the point where he was shaking and trembling really hard. He said he had to keep putting the gun in his other hand and kind of shaking his arm out, because he was literally getting real jumpy to where he couldn't even, you know, keep a sight picture on the pistol. And he had seen nothing but a dark shadow at this point. This is all what he's feeling. And he's roughly about 20 yards from this willow line at the furthest distance. And like I said, it's out on a little bit of a spit. Not necessarily a spit, but a curve of the river, a sharper curve of the river, right? And so as he's contemplating what he's gonna do, because he knows he wants to get the hell out of there, way off in the distance, he hears the outboard fire up, right? This is moments after he let a shot off, you know, not long at all. And so he was like, well, maybe they heard my shot and they're gonna come, so good, you know. And he's still got the pistol cocked and he's still watching the tree line. And as the wind's blowing, every little darker you know, kind of shade of green, he's pointing at it, you know, he's going back and forth. He's just really on edge. So he decides, screw this. He yells again, stands as he's walking over to the shrubs again where he heard the sound a little bit earlier, and he's looking in, he doesn't hear nothing. He shoots up one more time. Now the pistol only holds 5 shots, and so he knows he has 2 left. He always carries an empty one under the hammer or whatever, so his thing, whatever. So he knows he has a couple shots left, and decides, well, I don't want to be this close to the brush. I want to have some distance of movement if I have to swing on this thing or whatever. And nothing, and he hears the boat. Sounds like it's starting to make progress towards him. So he decides he's going to go back down off the cut bank and stand down on the gravelly part, the rocky part of the water, by the water, and just kind of peek over the edge of the bank to keep an eye out, and just because he wanted to stop feeling like he was being stared at. So as he climbs down the bank, he's looking back and forth, and this whole time he's been looking back and forth in front of him. When he gets over the riverbank and is looking, something way off to his right catches his eye, and standing there on the riverbank is this hairy man. He said it looked pitch black, and with the way the sunlight was, it was silhouetted, so he couldn't really make out much other than it was a big humanoid type figure. And as he's looking at it, he still got the gun in his hand, so everywhere he turned, the gun was. And so it so happened he was pointing, and he scampered back up onto the bank he felt like he was too low. He didn't want this thing to get on top of him too quickly, so he got back up on the bank, and he's watching this thing, and it's just standing there. It's just stoic, not making a sound, just standing dead still, and he's just doesn't know what to do. So what he does is he starts backtracking downriver from where they dropped him off. Now, as he's doing so, because he didn't want to be stared at by this thing, he was getting a very sick feeling to his stomach when he felt like it was staring at him. So he was trying to kind of retreat, and so he's going down the riverbank, and he's constantly looking around, and then he hears, as the boat's getting closer, still a distance off, he hears this thing crashing through those willows coming the direction he's going. So in a panic, he shoots one more time, and when he shoots, it dawns on him he's got one shot left in that revolver, and he left his little day bag or whatever on the skiff and forgot to click it to his fishing tackle. He wore a little fishing tackle harness, and he had forgot to clip it onto there with his extra ammo. So he literally has one shot left in this thing, and he immediately knows he shouldn't have shot, because it didn't stop the thrashing. The thrashing continued on down past him through the willows and stuff, and then it stops abruptly, and then he hears movement. Sounds like it's going away, but at an angle, kind of like going back the direction it came, but just kind of at a little wider of a cut through. And so he decides, well, I'm gonna get back up to that spit, because then they can see me there when they're coming down the river, because at one point it's from that sharp turn or whatever where they dropped him off, it's kind of a straight shot, so he could see a pretty good distance of when they come around the bend, and he'll know they're getting closer, what have you. And so as he makes his way back up to where he was, that thrashing that had moved off was all of a sudden sound like it was a freight train coming right at him. And so he's literally down on his knees, quivering, shaking, doesn't know what to do about the whole situation. And he said just at that moment he was basically saying his prayers and, you know, making good with his maker, so to speak. And all of a sudden it stopped. The thrashing and stuff stopped, because he never stopped looking. And as he was looking, because it sounded like it stopped just outside of his view, he's watching, and the wind's still blowing the willows every now and again. So you got to understand, it's a wall of green willows kind of just rippling like water, you know, when the wind blows by, just whoosh. So he was watching that for any dark spots, and as he's just lowering the gun to give it a rest, because it was a heavy gun, and he was just kind of catching his breath, trying to gain his composure, because he was really feeling sick to his stomach from feeling like he had a hole being stared through him. All these sounds, what he saw, and so he's literally a total paradigm shift, you know, because he never really put much stock into Sasquatch or Bigfoot, any of that stuff. He's just an outdoorsman, fisherman. His biggest worry was a bear or a rogue moose coming to stomp him to death, right? And so as he's contemplating these things, he said where he suspected it stopped, the wind gusted pretty hard, and it parted the willows just enough to where it showed half the head and half of the chest and part of the arm as the wind blew. So he literally knew it was about 25 yards from him, and it was roughly 10 foot tall and massive. And he said that when he saw it partially, when the wind blew, it kind of had a shocked look on his face, and kind of quickly ducked back as the wind blew by or whatever. So he stayed more in cover. And so he knew right where it was. He had that one shot, and he was thinking, I hope this skiff hurries up. As he's contemplating all this stuff, he hears the skiff come around the bend up the river a ways, and he knows they're coming for him. And he has a sense of relief, but he knows it's probably about 3 minutes before they get to him. So he keeps watching that same spot, and he stands up and he goes, I don't want to shoot you. I don't want to shoot you. Leave me alone. Doesn't hear a sound. Says, I don't want you to hurt me. Don't shoot, or don't try to hurt me. I won't shoot you. Leave me alone. Not a sound back. And this whole time, again, the wind is blowing, and it's constantly rustling leaves, and there's sounds all around him, but he's laser focused on that one spot. He saw it. And as he's staring in that spot, another heavy gust blows, and it's no longer in that spot. It's about 5 feet to his left, doing the same thing. As soon as the wind hit hard, it kind of leaned back in with the brush to stay out of view. And he starts screaming out, "Leave me alone, leave me alone." And it had been going on for a minute that he was screaming and just going off out of terror. It was total survival. I'm gonna be as big and bad and make noises as possible. And that's exactly what he did. And as he's doing that, he didn't even realize the skiff had pulled up, stopped, and one of the other customers that was fishing came up the bank with the shotgun. Comes and stands next to him. He's like, "Where's the bear? Where's the bear?" And he turned to tell the guy, and he said, the bear ran off that way. So in that split moment, he made the decision not to tell these people that he was with what really just happened and what was happening, right? And so he's standing there and he goes, it took off. You guys are here, so let's get out of here, right? He turns around and is going to the boat. The other client was still kind of keeping guard on the bank so they didn't get rushed from behind, right? He was holding the shotgun. Well, when he gets down into the skiff, he goes, "Come on," and he was waiting to push the skiff offshore so they could continue on down and just leave the area or whatever. The other customer comes running, hauling ass, jumps over him from the bank, lands in the skiff, damn near breaks his ankle, jumping in there, knocked another customer back off the bench seat, saying, "Go, go, go, it's a fucking Bigfoot." And everyone just kind of looks at each other, and he pushes off, jumps on, and the guy just kicked around the bank, and they just got out of there, went back down towards the Tikchik Narrows. He said the funniest thing is he's glad he didn't say anything, because that guy that said it was a Bigfoot and jumped into the skiff, everyone was there on, I think it was a 10-day trip, and the trip had just started. So they were going to be going to various places all around there to do all this trout fishing. And the whole rest of the trip, that guy caught nothing but slack about, "Oh, you see another Bigfoot? Oh, there's the brown bear. Is that the Bigfoot you saw? Is that the one?" So he was glad he didn't say anything. But I wonder how many of those experiences happen to people and they don't say nothing about it. Chalk it up to a bear, chalk it up to something else. I don't know, but that whole area, up the New York, the whole Bristol Bay drainage is just rich with all sorts of different encounters and experiences out that way. Looking forward to making it out there at some point to film the documentary, but time will tell on that. Shout out to Dave the Tech Guy. Check out the website, subarcticalaskasasquatch.com, and we'll catch you on the next one.